get the bagels either.
But I mean, like what's his name? Tony.
Yeah.
He runs a great class. He really does, and he gets a big draw.
Yeah.
He gets a lot of people. Yeah, watch. Unless there's a barber on this, there's 12 people there. That's it. In fact,
We have 15. It's okay. It's okay, but it's not what it was. But, and now the season's over, but it will.
tell me about your
It's starting July 1st.
Oh, okay, so he's not here yet.
No, that's his house. That's his house.
There's, at your buddy, up the boat cars, they have a young guy with a guitar. He's fabulous. And just, I was there for, when I was there about a month or two ago, they had just announced that they finally got his certificate, whatever it was, as a full-fledged cantor, as opposed to being a cantor. This kid, anybody that's in their 50s, a kid, is dynamite. He's got a lot of personality, a lot of
I wonder who it is. Oh, that's Dan.
Yes, Dan.
Very nice.
My God.
Test.
You know, Randy asked me just the other day, will I have 16? I said,
Huh.
Rabbi, how are you?
Okay, all good.
Am I getting excited?
Yeah,
Are you getting excited?
nervous. Yeah, but you know, I never see her anyway. She's always out and about. So
She's gone.
yeah,
Consider it history.
as long as she's happy.
Come back to visit.
Yeah. So
But don't forget, we have Rand's brother and sister-in-law who are really great people. And they take everybody out.
we love it. Yeah, that's good to know. It's good to know. Need all the help you can get.
She needs somewhere to go for Rosh Hashanah.
All right. All right. Shabbat shalom. Good to see you. Thanks for braving the elements. It's pretty wet out there. Okay, here we go. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות Asod et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Boirei peri agafen. Amen. L'chaim.
Flavor rainwater.
Okay, Torah study blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
A good day to go back to Noah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this is a very fascinating Torah portion. If you had to pick one Torah portion that really had the whole history and depth and breadth of the Jewish experience in it, it might be Naso. Now, Naso is the second Torah portion in Numbers. We're going to begin in a moment in chapter 5 of Numbers, verse, starts like, chapter 5. We're going to skip 4. 4 is really kind of boring. It's just a list of the 3 different types of Levites based on the clans of the 3 sons of Levi and what different stuff of the tabernacle they schlepped. So it's not that fascinating. But when you get to, it's important, and we're going to point out why it's there, but we don't need to necessarily read it. We'll start with chapter 5. The first triennial cycle goes through the first 11 verses of chapter 5, but we may need even more than that. There's a difference between national goals and religious goals. Sometimes religious goals overtake nationalism. And then, you say, France is a Christian country. You have someone who will say something like that. Or, as you hear in Hungary, Hungary is a Christian country. Okay, well, the majority, what that tells you is they're not interested in pluralism. Hungary is a very interesting country right now because they're one of Israel's best friends in the EU, and they're one of the most anti-Semitic countries. They like Jews when they're in Israel. They don't like Jews when they're in Hungary.
Sounds like the evangelical.
Right. You see the difference? It's a good deal. So, there's some anti-Semites who hate Jews wherever they are. And there's some who say, as long as I don't have to see you, as long as you're not in my country, okay, do what you want. And if you want to fight the Muslims for us, that's fine. So if you're a nationalist, what are your goals really? I mean, what do you hope to achieve? What do you want? What do you think?
Close borders to start with.
Okay.
Christian nationalism.
Uniformity. I mean, you could be a nationalist of any religion. There are quite a few Christian ones over time. Muslim too. Right. Probably other stuff too. Communism is, a religion of the misguided, right? But what are your goals? What do you want? I mean, what are you ultimately trying to achieve? What is winning? Yeah. Richard?
Mind oxy.
What does it mean?
Whatever I want.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's all about me. It's all about whatever I want. If I want more of it, I want everybody to have what I have.
Right.
Because I know what I have is good.
So even people who seem to lack any redeeming qualities at all, who are nationalist, can figure out that that's vapid. That's not so great. So they add their religion to their nationalism. And then you have terms like caliphate, Christian nationalism. So if you're, if you're, if you say Christian nationalist, and I don't just mean in the idiotic, terms of, some of the worst Congress people this country's ever known who currently are from Rome, Georgia, but in terms of France in the 1300s, in terms of it, why be more than nationalist? Why be Christian nationalist? Now what do you hope to achieve? More power, okay.
So you're trying to achieve a singularity of one culture, and nationalism comes in many different brands, many different flavors. Populism can be nationalism, authoritarianism can be nationalism. I think you have to compare nationalism to something else. Nationalism can be part of colonialism. So the problem is nationalism comes in many different flavors.
Okay, fair enough.
State control.
Oh, I forgot we're not using the mic. Mark's here, so he's not here to text us to tell us to do it. So. Can you pass this to Shelley?
I was just going to say to impose your beliefs
Ah,
on the rest of the people, that whatever we believe is correct, you should believe that as well.
okay. Richard's right behind you.
I think that you are seeking the imprimatur of God.
Seeking-
I think you're seeking the imprimatur
Oh, okay.
of God.
Throwing
I
some
think
big
you're
words at us
seeking to
today.
align yourself with God, and who's going to fight God?
Is
Not
that
the nationalist, because God's on the side of the nationalist.
Is that a thesaurus in your hand, or?
That's the voice.
Voice of God.
Oh, I mean, you're using some big words. I'm not used to all right, so, if you're just a nationalist, then you say, okay, we want France to be French. We want, Poland to be Polish, and we don't want immigrants. But if you add Christian nationalist to it, or Muslim, or whatever, then you give yourself some credence. What's a better word? You give yourself some authority. You give yourself some moral authority to do it.
Credibility.
Why does France need to stay French? Because that's what God would want. Because it's Christian nationalism. And so now it gives you a little bit more of a purpose and a little bit more of a goal, because to not have a goal is frustrating. America right now has no goal. We have no idea where we're going. There may be a goal. But if there is, I don't know what it is. It hasn't been made clear to me. No one has said to me, I haven't heard one American say, here's where I think we should go and here's how we're going to get there. We're just, all we do is fight with each other. We have no goal. We don't even know if Russia's bad anymore. I mean, a rule of thumb, Russia's always bad. What don't you get? Right? But we don't know where we're going. Israel may or may not know where it's going. It's a lot more complicated. But this week's Torah portion is about where we want to go. Okay? And Judaism was never meant to be a nationality. However, it's dependent on the land. So maybe that makes it a nationality inadvertently. Why do I say it was never meant to be a nationality? We weren't supposed to have a king. We were supposed to just have a prophet who talked to God, and God told us what to do. That's a religion. We didn't need a government. We had judges who worked for God. And if they didn't know the answer, they went to the priest, and the priest's email system on his thing lit up and told God the answer, told him the answer from God, and that was it. But we were supposed to be ruled by God. That's what we're limited to in language, but that's what you would call a religion. We were going to have a capital, but not really a place where lawmakers met so much as a place where we cut up animals and burned them so that they went up to God. Yes, the Sanhedrin sat and talked about, the different court cases based on the Torah, but for the most part, the priests and the Levites were slicing and dicing animal. I mean, it was a barbecue with music. So there's something about Israel that was meant to be different than every other, what you would call a nation. Now, how and why? How and why? So, by the way, there is no other religion that you can't do fully unless you're in the land. You can do every other. Now, there's the Hajj, whatever, but you only have to go there once. So you go. You get a room in Saudi Arabia, walk in circles, and you go back home. But in Judaism, most of the mitzvahs now we can't do. And that's a problem. Okay, so why do I bring all of this up with regard to Naso? So if you look at chapter 5 of Numbers, Ed, you're in the hot seat, huh? You have big shoes to fill with Norman and Aspen. Here's you. Numbers chapter 5.
Page 1050.
So take my word for it that chapter 4 is a census of the Levites.
Chapter 4 was not so much.
That's right, but it's not bad.
It was determined by the Levites' genes. So.
That's right. And the Levites were the smallest tribe. And you'll see here. By the way, the reason why the Levites were the smallest tribe, they're much smaller than all the other tribes. The Levites were not slaves in Egypt. And so Pharaoh was having trouble drowning all of the babies. It wasn't working. Nobody was participating. He couldn't kill all the Israelites. So he came up with an idea, and he said, the women, in order to have relations with their husband after their cycle, they need to go to the mikveh. And if they don't go to the mikveh, then they won't be able to have relations with their husband. They won't be able to have kids. So we're going to prevent them from going to the mikveh. So he stationed guards at the Nile, and they wouldn't let the Jews, go in and the Jewish women and immerse. But the Levites weren't slaves. Oh, so what did God do? God caused a miracle. The miracle was that the women stopped having their cycle. And so they were able to continue to procreate. But the Levites who weren't slaves were still allowed to go to the mikveh. Or they weren't allowed to go to the mikveh, but because they weren't slaves, God didn't stop their cycles. So they continued to have their cycle and couldn't go to the mikveh, so they had much less kids than all the other tribes. It's all in the Midrash. You can take it or leave it. Can I prove that that's what happened?
No, it's grainy.
The videos that we have are grainy. It's hard to tell as they're walking. It's hard to, I looked at it, I'm like, is she a Levite? It's hard to tell on the screen. It's hard to tell on the screen. So, okay. All right. So you can take it or leave it. Chapter 5, here we go.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Instruct the Israelites to remove from camp anyone with an eruption or a discharge and anyone defiled by a corpse. Remove male and female alike. Put them outside the camp so that they do not defile the camp of those in whose midst I dwell." The Israelites did so, putting them outside the camp. As the Lord had spoken to Moses, so the Israelites did. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites. When a man or a woman commits any wrong toward a fellow man, thus breaking faith with the Lord, and that person realizes his guilt, he shall confess the wrong that he has done. He shall make restitution in the principal amount and add 1/5 to it, giving it to him whom he has wronged. If the man has no kinsman to whom restitution can be made, the amount repaid shall go to the Lord for the priest, in addition to the ram of expiation with which expiation is made on his behalf. So too, Any gift among the sacred donations that the Israelites offer shall be the priest's, and each shall retain his sacred donations. Each priest shall keep what is given to him.
Okay, so now that we've figured out who's in, numbers, we talked about who's the first Torah portion was counting all of the tribes and how many there were. And now we get to the beginning of chapter 4 of Bamidbar, and we count how many are the Levites, because we didn't count the Levites the first time around. And now we start to say, all right, now we know who's here. Now we can start. And by starting, I mean Bamidbar. In the wilderness, you're going to go now and travel for 40 years. And so for the first time ever, the Jews are going to be wandering with the Torah. Okay? Because we've been at Sinai this whole time. And now we're going to wander for another 38 years. We've been there for almost over a year and a half. So now that we're going to go and travel and create a camp, we need to have rules for the camp. Whether we're stationary or moving, we need to have rules. And there are two rules that come about right away. The first one is stay pure. Right? There are different things that make you impure. If you have someone who's impure, you've got to remove them from the camp. Which means to say the camp that you're traveling with needs to stay pure. Okay. Now the idea is that everybody has everything that you need. You're not going to go hungry because the food's going to rain down. You're not going to run out of money because there really is no such thing as money. You're not going to lose your land because nobody owns land. Right? Everyone has anything that you want. Nobody's rich, nobody's poor. Everyone got the same thing when they left Egypt. Okay, maybe someone mismanaged, wait 7 years, it will revert back, whatever. So if everyone is solvent, then look at verse 6. Why would anyone need to steal from anyone else?
It's their nature.
And then it talks about, you have to return the debt and make up your sin. But why would I steal? You don't have any more than I do. I don't need anything. So what you're saying is, I don't have what I need. I don't have what I need. But the only thing you need is God. And if you say I don't have what I need and the only thing I need is God, then what you're saying is I don't really need God, or I don't understand how I need God. And that's not good. So the very first thing that we're really being told here is, as a Jew goes out to build his or her society, you need God. If you don't have God, that will cause problems between each other. What other nation has this? We say one nation under God. What does it mean? What does it mean? So the Torah says, okay, here's what it means. It means if you're stealing, that's the very first indication that you don't get what we're trying to do here. And now, when we get to Israel, you could say, okay, things are different. Fine. But while we're wandering around in the wilderness, everyone's got food. The food rains down in manna. Everyone's got water. There's a stream. Right? Because of Miriam, there's the wells. So everybody has what they need. And I'm telling you, I don't have what I need, when the only thing you're supposed to need is God. So that's why I think of all the sins it could have said here, it comes to theft and purity. Okay. Now, once we, use the, no, I'm done. I don't even know what I'm talking.
Also, line 6, I'm a bit confused, because in the past, we've articulated offense to men or man. Here it says to another human being. And in the past, we've always said that this really, in context, meant to another Jew. Whereas when it's articulated as another human being, do these rules apply to Jews or to everyone?
No, this is just talking about Jews, because there is nobody else. There's no one else allowed in the camp. It's just Jews.
Well, there were people there.
Who else would be wandering for 40
No,
minutes
but-
in the desert?
So look, no, there are certain, the mixed multitude converted, although then they all got killed in the golden calf. But the only other person there would be in the camp, living in the camp. We're talking about creating a society in the camp, is a slave, a foreign slave. Now, why would you have a foreign slave? Because you captured them in war. But the foreign slave then is required, as long as they are a slave, to follow the mitzvahs. And so it's called a ger toshav, but for all intents and purposes, it's a Jew.
Again, it's in context and meant to be local,
Yeah.
rather than a general rule.
Right, so if I stole from your slave, that would be a sin. That would be a sin. Now look, if you're out and about, so there are other rules though. You know, there are rules of war. So if we go out and we get into a skirmish with, the whoever, the Amalekites or whatever, or some other, whatever, there are rules about what their stuff you're allowed to take and what you're not allowed to take. So there are rules about how you deal with non-Jews, but those are different rules than this. These rules are about creating inside the camp. So,
Not creating a society.
yeah, but it's, it's not like Boca where you have, like 8 Jewish homes, and then there's like a non-Jew who was partners with that one Jew who told him you should move down here, and then there's like 4 more Jews and maybe an Indian guy. It's not like that. It's all Jews, right? There's just. All right. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 11.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, if a man's wife has gone astray and broken faith with him, in that a man has had carnal relations with her unbeknownst to her husband, and she keeps secret the fact that she has defiled herself without being forced, and there is no witness against her, but a fit of jealousy comes over him, and he is wrought up about the wife who has defiled herself, or if a fit of jealousy comes over one, and he is wrought up about his wife, although she has not defiled herself, the man shall bring his wife to the priest, and he shall bring an offering for her, 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour."
Okay, so you remember the sota? So this is the suspected adulteress.
No oil shall be poured
Wait,
upon
hang on, sorry, one sec. So the suspected adulteress is this woman who the husband thinks that he's cheating on her. And the reason that he thinks that is because she was seen secluded in a room with a man who's with a different man. And he doesn't know what happened in that room, but he does know that she was in that room. And so for that reason, he can do this test and so forth. In Israel, right now, there's a lot of problems in the hotels where all the people who have been evacuated from the north have been living in a hotel for 9 months. And living in a hotel is terrible. No matter how nice the hotel is, when you have 4 kids in one hotel room and no appliances and what they're going through is really bad. It sounds nice. Oh, there's a pool. It's not. It's really tough. It's really, really tough. And there's a lot of stress. And the kids are stressed. And the parents are stressed. And there have been affairs. And there's been, lots of fighting between couples. And, stress does that. And there's reports of terrible stories that there's been abuse and just terrible things that are happening in these hotels. We need to get these people back home.
Isn't that where they put the people from the kibbutz? They put them in hotels.
Lots of them, yeah. The whole north. That whole...
And the south,
South too. Yeah, the South, they're starting to come home, or building new houses, but yeah, they're living in hotels, and it's a terrible situation, and there's a lot of stress. And the Torah now immediately goes to, okay, you're going to be wandering around. It's kind of a weird situation. We've never had this situation before. We're all going to be living together. It's possible that husbands and wives don't get along. It's possible that people start having affairs, and that's a real problem. So right away, we're going to tell you, you shouldn't do that. Because if you do, we're going to make you drink this stuff and your stomach's going to explode. And they probably only had to do that once or twice before people said, I'm attracted to you, but not that much. My stomach, but the Torah immediately goes to that. So look at what we're trying to do. We're creating rules right off the bat for how we're going to create our society and how we're going to move around. So we want it to be pure, we want it to be reliant on God, and we want to be able to have trust with each other. Okay. So there's this whole story of what's called the Sota, and it's followed up immediately. It goes through the whole story. We don't need to go through all of it, of what happens and stuff. But when it's over, and it tells the whole story of how you deal with the suspected adulteress, then there's another story. Numbers is a really interesting book of the Torah. I mean, the stories are really, really fun and interesting. So the next story after the Sota, after the suspected adulteress, begins in chapter 6. So I wanted to just skip to chapter 6 and just see the next story. Ken? Oh, yeah, please.
This puts a huge burden, is, of course, on the women here. But if a man, what rule did they have if it is a man who basically cheats on his wife, but then with a married woman, he can't automatically marry her. If she were a single woman, she'd become another wife. Where's the punishment for the man in this?
Yeah, so...
And it says the last line here, 31, the man shall be clear of guilt, but the woman shall suffer for
Look,
her.
that would also be a capital punishment if you're married and you're sleeping with another woman who's married. If a man who's married sleeps with another woman who's married, and 2 witnesses see him, he would get the death penalty.
Man doesn't have to be married for that to be.
Right. As long if she's the wife of if she's married, then he would get the death penalty. Now, the case here actually seems like it's worse for women, but it's actually worse for men. I'll tell you why. Because if she goes and she has to drink this drink, if she's innocent, she'll drink it and nothing will happen. And they'll tell her, don't be in a secluded room anymore and this won't happen. If she's guilty and she drinks it, her stomach will explode and she'll die. But the man that she had the affair with, his stomach will explode and he'll die too. So, on the other hand, if she's guilty, I don't think anyone's stomach ever exploded. Why? Because if you're guilty, just don't drink it. Just say, I refuse to drink it, and then everyone will say, that's an admission of guilt. We know you're guilty. You don't have to drink it. We're not going to make you drink it because you admitted that you're guilty. So I imagine any woman would get up there and say, yeah, I did. I'm not drinking that. But at least she has the choice. The man who did it has got to be really nervous because she gets up there to either drink or don't drink. If she doesn't drink, then everyone knows he's guilty too. And if she does drink, then he dies too. So it's not a good situation for anybody.
And I know it says the sota, but in verse 6, it says a man or woman, a man or woman. Is that the only time it says if a man or woman commits a sin?
No. You see that in the Torah in a variety of places.
Okay.
So, Okay, yeah, it doesn't always say that, but there are other places where it does. Okay, chapter 6. Here we go.
The Lord, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if anyone, man or woman, explicitly utters a Nazarite's vow to set himself apart for the Lord, he shall abstain from wine and any other intoxicant. He shall not drink vinegar or vinegar of wine or of any other intoxicant. Neither shall he drink anything in which grapes have been steeped, nor eat grapes fresh or dried. Throughout his term as Nazarite, he may not eat anything that is obtained from the grapevine, even seeds or skin. Throughout the term of his vow as Nazarite, no razor shall touch his head. He shall remain consecrated until the completion of his term as a Nazarite of the Lord, the hair of his head being left to grow untrimmed. Throughout the term that he is set apart for the Lord, he shall not go in where there is a dead person. Even his father or mother or his brother or sister, even if they should die, he must not defile himself for them, since hair set apart for his God is upon his head. Throughout his term as Nazarite, he is consecrated to the Lord."
Okay, so right after the Sota, there's this story of something called the Nazarite, or the Nazir in Hebrew. There's a whole tractate of the Talmud on both of these things. There's a tractate called Sota, and there's a tractate called Nazir, which means there's a lot to talk about. So the Nazir is someone who says, I want to go above and beyond. I want to do even more mitzvahs. Now, wanting to do that is one of the 613 mitzvahs. You can't say, well, I want to make up a 614th. But the 600, and this is one of the 613 that's optional. And if you want to do it, you can. So what you do is three things. You abstain from wine or any grapes or anything, any products like that. 2, you're not allowed to cut your hair, although there are rules on what you're allowed to do. You know, you could trim it up at the bottom, or there's all kinds of rules. And 3, you're not allowed to be around any dead bodies, which makes you impure. So who's the par excellence Nazarite in the Bible? This is a trick question. Samuel. Samson was like a quasi Nazarite. He was great at not cutting his hair, until Delilah did. He was great at not drinking wine, but he killed people all the time. He was a warrior. He killed thousands and thousands of people. So when you kill people, you're by dead people. So he was like a quasi-Nazarite. Samuel, when Hannah couldn't get pregnant and came to God and said, if I could ever get pregnant, I will dedicate my son as a Nazarite, then Samuel, Shmuel, becomes the par excellence Nazarite, and he is for his whole life. Now, most people, if you said you were going to do a Nazarite vow, they're 30 days. And after 30 days, you could do another 30 days, or you could say you wanted to do it for a couple of years or whatever. By the way, you should never say it. Because if you do say that you wanted to do it, then even today, you're bound by it. And the only way to get out of it is to offer a sacrifice. So you can't ever get out of it. So don't accidentally say that you want to be one. If you want to be one, when the temple comes back, have at it. But you don't want to do it now. So they don't exist anymore because the only way to complete it is to offer the sacrifice. Okay, now Rashi asks a question. Why is the Sota story come right before the Nazir story? So if you look at the first source on the sheet, Ken, would you mind reading that? Rashi on Numbers 6:2.
Okay, before I read that, a question. Do the Christians think that John the Baptist was the quintessential Nazarite?
Nazarene, maybe.
Okay, all right. He was a Nazarite.
He was a Nazarene.
He was a Nazir.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
In Luke, yeah.
Okay. My Luke is pretty weak.
Okay. If he clearly utters, why? Oh, if he clearly utters, okay. Why is the section dealing with the Nazarite placed in juxtaposition to the section dealing with Sota? To tell you that he who has once seen a Sota in her disgrace should abstain from wine because it may lead to adultery.
Yeah, so the Talmud says, and Rashi's just quoting the Talmud here, that by drinking wine, that's what could lead you to frivolous behavior and end up leading to adultery. So anyone who sees a sota should say, whoa, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm going to become a Nazir to remind me not to do that. So the Nazir then is like a safeguard to put in place so that people don't bring impurity to the camp. Okay. Now, what's different, I think, about, the camp and the Jews wandering around in the wilderness, and what makes them different than any other nation, is that they schlep around the tabernacle with them wherever they go. And whenever they stop, they set it up, and so they have God's presence right in between. And that presence is called, anyone know? The Kabbalistic term? Shekhinah. Shekhinah. Now, you've heard the word Mishkan?
Yeah.
Mishkan it's the same root as Shekhinah. By the way, it means to dwell. God's divine presence that dwells there. In modern Hebrew, your shochen is your neighbor. Your shchunah is your neighborhood. Right? This is modern Hebrew. But Mishkan means the dwelling where God dwells, right? In the tabernacle, in the Mishkan. Now, careful here. What's the difference between Mishkan and Mikdash? You've heard the word Mikdash? So in Hebrew, the Holy Temple is called Beit HaMikdash. Mikdash, if you've never heard of it, you've probably heard the word that it comes from, Kadosh. Kiddush, Kaddish, Kedushin, you've heard of that? Okay. So the question, if Beit HaMikdash is the name for the Holy Temple, what's the difference between Mishkan and Mikdash? Any ideas? Annabelle? Can you pass the mic to him?
I think, I'm not sure, that the Mishkan is a portable.
Okay. Well, until they get to Jerusalem.
Yes.
Then it has a set.
But that's basically the difference. The Mishkan is carried by people.
Okay.
The Mikdash is fixed in a place.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So I don't want to give the answer away for 17 more minutes. But I want us to keep that in mind. And I would argue that the difference between Mikdash and Mishkan might be the difference between Jewish nationalism in the land of Israel and whatever everyone else is doing in their countries. I used to have this joke, it's pretty amazing when in 1948 when they decided, well, what's the nation of Israel going to be? They had to pick a name of the country. And Israel, a good name. They could have picked Judea. I don't know. They could have picked Bnei Yisrael. Who knows? Could have picked Judah. But, they went deep into our tradition and deep into the Bible and going back 3,500 years, going back 3,800 years to the time that Jacob strived with God. And you compare that to, Iceland. It's like, what are we going to call this place? You're going to think I'm crazy. How about this? Iceland. I would have loved to have been in the room. And people tell me, well, there's not that much ice there. I've seen lots of pictures of Iceland. There's plenty of ice. Don't tell me Iceland's green, Greenland's they both got plenty of ice. All right, it doesn't matter. I've always thought that was funnier than everyone else does, but let's look now. I want to try to get to the answer here, keeping in mind that as the Jews are creating, as God is telling Moses how to create the society as they travel, and we know that we want it to be pure. We know we want it to be relying on God so you don't have to steal. We know we want it to be, everyone faithful to their own family and no adultery and any of that stuff, and put in safeguards to make sure you don't do that. And God's at the center, and there's a Mishkan there. Okay? So the Mishkan, just before we explain the difference, Mishkan refers to a dwelling place. Right? That's why a shochen is a neighbor, and a shchuna is a neighborhood. And Shekhinah is God's divine presence. It's there, it lives there. Mikdash refers to holiness, to making something holy. We need to figure out what the difference is there. Okay. Okay, so there's some help here from the Talmud. Joe, do you have so the second source comes from the Talmud from a tractate called Megillah, page 29a.
Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, "Come and see how beloved the Jewish people are before the Holy One, blessed be He. As every place they were exiled, the divine presence went with them. They were exiled to Egypt, and the divine presence went with them. As it is stated, did I reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt? They were exiled to Babylonia, and the divine presence went with them. As it's stated, for your sake I have sent to Babylonia, so too, when in the future when you will be redeemed, the divine presence will be with them. As it's stated, then the Lord your God will return with your captivity." It does not state he will cause the Jewish people to return, but rather it says he will return, which teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, will return together with them from among the various exiles.
Okay. So this is the Shekhinah. If we read it in Hebrew, you would see that it's referring to the Shekhinah. And so what Annabella was alluding to is that that there's the concept of the Shekhinah being in one place, and there's the concept of the Shekhinah moving around. Now, this shouldn't surprise us. Why? Because that's what Numbers is all about. The Shekhinah is here. Okay, a cloud moves. The Jews go and camp over here. Now the Shekhinah is here. Then we go and camp again. The Shekhinah is here. No, now it's here. It keeps moving as the camp moves, and the Levites set everything up and so forth. So the Shekhinah went to Babylonia. The Shekhinah went to Rome. You know, wherever we were, it goes to, which means that when the Jews go back to Israel, Shekhinah goes back to Israel too. So that's according to the Talmud, which means that it's always with us. Now, you could ask the question, well, what good is that? You know, where was it in Auschwitz? What good is that? You know, the last 2,000 years have been horrible. So you could say that's true, but Judaism still exists. And a lot of other people might have given up on this whole endeavor many times along the way. I heard someone say, you know, it's amazing. There's Jews in Cleveland. There's Jews in Nashville. There's Jews in Texas. There's a few Jews in Rochester. I know that, Rabbi. She was talking about. Wherever you go, there's Jews. He said, where are the Hittites? Wherever I go. Even I go to New York City. No two people are from the same place. No two people speak the same language. No Hittites. There's no Girgashites. There's no Jebusites. There's no Romans. There's no Babylonians. So maybe if you have the Shekhinah, it guarantees your survival, which is something. Maybe not. Okay. Let's keep going. And yeah, Bobby? Use the mic.
One observation. In the desert, we followed the cloud. We followed God. God didn't follow us. When we were in exile, it appears that God followed us on
very
our
nice.
return.
Very nice. Yeah. You know, look, through our sins and the destruction of the temple, we lost our connection to God. So we lost the cloud. We save things to the cloud, but we don't have the cloud.
Very good.
We redefined the cloud, but we lost it. We don't have God leading us anymore because of our sins. That happened actually after the sin of the spies. Okay, so the Tractate of Sota, which we were just talking about, the suspected adulteress, page 9a. Shelley, would you mind reading there?
With regard to David, the citadel that housed his home and city was not destroyed, as it is written, her gates are sunk into the ground, as the gates of Jerusalem built by David were not destroyed by enemies, but sunk into the ground and were buried there. This is also so with regard to Moses, as the Master said, when the first temple was built, the tent of meeting was sequestered, including its boards, its clasps, and its bars, and its pillars, and its sockets. The Gemara asks, where is it sequestered? Rav Hizda says that Avimi says, beneath the tunnels of the sanctuary.
Right, so
tunnels.
If they would have read this, there would have never been Indiana Jones movies. They said, we know where the ark is. What's the point of this? You know, they did all these movies for nothing. The ark's, it never left Jerusalem. What's with this nonsense? But look how much fun we all had. Harrison Ford, Okay, so, there's the every other theory. Raiders of the Lost Ark, I thought, fabulous. Temple of Doom, terrible. Last Crusade, fabulous. The skull thing, terrible. Every other one. So the next one's going to be great. But it's amazing. You have two. It's amazing how they make every other one is great and every other one is horrible. That was brought to you from the school of Shem and Eber. They didn't just teach Torah, they also reviewed movies. All right. You're not going to get this in Boca. That's the kind of analysis you can't get in Boca or Boynton. All right, so what is Bavli saying here? You know the song David Melech? Israel. What comes after Melech Israel? Well, good, and some of you even know the...
Yeah.
David Melech Israel, David king of Israel, Chai Chai V'Kayam. What does that mean? Lives forever. He's the eternal king. Well, why? What does that mean? What makes him any more eternal? First of all, by the way, he's dead. He's dead. You can go to his tomb. No one believes that he's buried there, but you can go there. It's in the same building as
The Last Supper.
the Last Supper. What's fun is you can have a pizza ordered to there.
You have the Last Supper.
And just right, Last
Leave
Supper.
the pepperoni off.
+1, right. Okay, or the next supper, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of good titles for that. King David built the walls of Jerusalem. I mean, Shem actually built the original walls, the son of Abraham, but King David built the real walls when he conquered Jerusalem. And those walls are gone. But where did they go? So if you look, according to Lamentations, her gates are sunk into the ground, as the gates of Jerusalem built by David were not destroyed by her enemies, but sunk into the ground and were buried there, which means that they'll rise again. That's why David's eternal. His Jerusalem is going to be, again, his Jerusalem, and the walls that are around Jerusalem now are Ottoman. They're only 400 years, or 600 years old. 400 years? 400 years old. They're from the 1600s. They're cool, they look really old, but they're not the walls of King David. Are some of them built on maybe the ramparts where they thought King David's wall? Maybe. But there's nothing left of King David's walls except underground where they sunk according to Lamentations. And they're going to rise again, and David's Jerusalem will be David. So that's what happened when King David, when the first temple was destroyed. But something also happened. King Solomon built all kinds of tunnels underneath the first temple when he built the temple in case it was ever destroyed, so that he could take all the holy stuff, including the Ark of the Covenant, and bury it under there. And that's where it is to this day. Do I suspect that the Israeli government's been down there and maybe found some stuff? It's possible. It's possible, but I doubt it because you're not supposed to. And halachically, that would be a big problem. But there are all kinds of excavations there. And I actually got to see, I think I told some of you, I got to see some of the secret excavations in David's city, which are just unbelievable, the stuff that they're finding and they're not showing the public yet. So they might have found some cool stuff. And by the way, if you look at the Arch of Titus, you can see they stole the menorah. But the greatest treasure was the Ark of the Covenant. So if they had it, they probably would have put the Ark of the Covenant on there, and they didn't. Why? Because they didn't have it. Because Solomon hid it. Should have hid the menorah too, but what are you going to do? Why didn't he hide the menorah? We needed it for Hanukkah. Because Hanukkah was still to come. And we wouldn't have had Hanukkah without, so had to leave that. But in the Second Holy Temple, there was no Ark of the Covenant. In the Second Holy Temple, that big room was empty. And the Ten Commandments and Moses' staff and Aaron's staff and the bottle of man and other things they put in there, the broken pieces of the first tablets, they were gone. They weren't in the Second Temple. Where were they? Well, according to this, they were hidden underground wherever Solomon designated that they should be hid in the event that the first temple was ever destroyed. That being said, if you walk over someone's grave, do you become infected with tumah, with impurity? Yeah. Just entering into a cemetery, you become impure. So, just because something's underground doesn't mean it doesn't radiate either purity or impurity. And to think that God's presence could be underground and not see its way through to the top is not possible. And so the Shekhinah, even though the Mishkan wasn't in the Second Temple, it was still buried underground. Why? Because that's where Solomon left it. Now, that's a problem. Because what we're saying is, the Shekhinah is buried underground, and that's where it stayed. But we went to Babylonia as slaves, and we just read that the Shekhinah came with us. So you could say, well, God is everywhere. But what the Talmud is trying to say is, no, the Shekhinah has its place. So how could it have, so here's the problem. How could it have come with us through all of our different exiles if it's still underneath? Okay. Let's see, what else did I bring? Okay. We're running out of time, so let's see if I get to all this. Let's just go to the last source, the Maharal. Those of you who are here on Shavuot, you've already seen this. If you were here when I taught on Shavuot, I used this source there too, and I thought it would fit here as well. The Maharal of Prague, 1500s. Check it. Prague, Czechoslovakia, whatever it's called today. Okay, so it says, look, he has a very interesting point here. And he's commenting on something that's written in the Talmud elsewhere, but here's what he says. And then I'll read this and then try to make sense of all of this, what we're trying to say. The Torah, actually, you know what? Oh, I just want to show you one more thing to make this all make sense. If you skip with me in this week's Torah portion to, I think, towards the end, something you're all familiar with. Where is it? Yeah. Chapter 8? Or 9? 6, what, 24? Is it?
1064.
Oh, no, what verse, though?
24.
Yeah.
22.
Oh, yeah, okay. For some reason I was thinking chapter. If you skip with me to chapter 6, verse 22. It says, V'adaber Shem Moshe lemor, God said to Moses, saying, Daber al Aaron, right, Aaron, because he's the priest. Vel banav, and his sons, who are also the priests. Lamor, and say to them, Ko tivarchu et bnei Yisrael, this is how you're going to bless the Jews. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. You've heard that before? Right, with the fingers? Which means, may God bless you and watch over you. Yair Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. May God shine his light upon you and deal kindly with you. But I just want to focus on the biggest gift, which is the last word. Yisa Hashem panav elecha, v'yasem lecha, God should lift his face upon you and grant you shalom, peace. So what is peace? What is peace? Now, look what the Maharal says. Then we'll come back to what is peace. The Torah is the form of Israel, and what happens to the Jewish people happens to the Torah. When God decreed there would be exile, and the Jews would be displaced and spread throughout the world, so the Torah would be exiled. So if the Shekhinah stays in Jerusalem, and the Jews leave Israel and are scattered around the world, they take a piece of God with them. That piece of God is what we call Torah. So when I ask you, what good is Torah when we're struggling in Babylonia? What good is trouble when we're struggling in Rome? What good is Torah in Auschwitz? Well, it worked. Because we're still here. I mean, it didn't save us. It didn't save us from 2,000 years of horrendous things, culminating in the Holocaust before the rebirth of the State of Israel. But we're still here. And we couldn't have done that without the Torah. Without the Torah, we would have been gone. We would have said, without the Torah, we would have said, what's the point? And I think that's where a lot of countries are. If you go to Iceland and you say, what's your goal? We want to be the leader in ice. What? Well, we got this lagoon. What? What's your goal? What's your goal? So, I don't know. Maybe some countries have good answers. Maybe you could go to England and say, what's your goal? And they'll say, to speak funny, to perfect the art of, fish and chips, whatever. I don't know what their goal is. What's their goal?
Win the next championship.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, I think a lot of Americans will tell you. If I could just see the Marlins win the championship once in my life, I'd die a happy man. Good luck with that. Stick to the Panthers. Stick to the Panthers. So I think here's the answer. Mishkan, to a few questions. First of all, let's answer a couple questions. What's the difference between Mishkan and Mikdash? Why is the greatest gift? If we live a perfect society, why is the gift at the end shalom? And what's our goal as a Jewish people? So, Mishkan is what generates out from God towards us. That's God's. By the way, this part now is just my idea, so you can take it or leave it. But Mishkan, I think, is what generates from God towards us. Mikdash is holiness, but we have to create it by doing mitzvahs. There is no Mikdash unless humanity makes it holy. What good is the sanctuary? What good is the altar if no one brings a sacrifice? What good is having a Torah if nobody reads it? Right? What good is charity if no one gives it? So, Mishkan is God coming to us. Mikdash is us trying to make what he gave us holy and come and meet him. So that's that meeting point between us and God is where Mishkan and Mikdash come together. That's what we strive for. Now, if you think about it, what was the greatest time period? If you had to say what was the most perfect time period in history for the Jewish people, the answer is clear. There's only been one time in history when the Jewish people had the Holy Temple and were united and had shalom. King Solomon. King David didn't build the temple. King Solomon built the temple. So King Solomon built the temple. He was king for 40 years. He built the temple. And for a brief glimmer, brief glimmer, there was the Jewish people united as one. They were the superpower of the ancient Near East, and they had perfect peace with God. Then Solomon died, and right away, the kingdom split. And everything started to fall apart until eventually the temple was destroyed. But God said to King David, you won't build the temple. Now, there's the thing with Bathsheba, but there's another reason that's given by the rabbis. Because he was a warrior and he had blood on his hands. And God said, the point of the temple is shalom. And you're a man of war, which is fine. You served your purpose. You built the city. You built the walls. I needed you to be a man of war. But the temple will be built by a man of peace. And so David named his son Shlomo. Shlomo is shalom. Right? And that was the one period of time where Mishkan and Mikdash came together in perfect harmony, where God and the Jewish people were one in the right place at the right time, in the right moment with the right king. And then he blew it, and they blew it, and the whole thing fell apart. But if you ask, what's the goal of Israel? The goal of the nation of Israel, the goal of the people of Israel, it's to come as one with God in the way that God wanted, which manifests in shalom, which means wholeness, which means peace. But what it really means is when we get to that moment when we're one with God, everything else works out. And we only accomplished it once in history under the kingdom of King Solomon, and that's what we're trying to get back to. And when we get back to that, and we achieve that, so that we're living in harmony with Torah, then our knowledge of God exponentially grows. The holiness that we bring into the world grows, and we create this society that was designed by God. A society where all impurity is removed. A society where it wouldn't even occur to you to steal from someone because you have everything you need and you know that everything you need is God. And you're one with that, and you've created a society where any temptation that you would have has safeguards to keep you away from that. And when you do all of that, then God will tell the priest to come to you and say, Vayasem lecha shalom, now you've achieved peace. So I don't know that there's any other country. You can go to Iceland, you can go to Austria, you can go to wherever. Ask them what their mission is. It's not going to hold a candle to this divine mission, at least in my opinion. Okay. Shabbat shalom. Yeah, I'm sure it is. How's the ice?
You know, this is all wrapped up by the Rolling Stones. You don't always get what you want. Like you try sometimes, you get what you want.
Just my find. That's a great line. To me.
Yes, 1, 2. Yes, 1, 2. Yes, 1, 2.